All right, hello everyone, and welcome today to what's going to be another verdict. I am Spray 1000, and today we're going to talk about, and if you know me, there's going to be a lot to talk about, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now, Pokemon Legends Arceus is the latest in a long-running line of Pokemon games. They don't really need much of an introduction. You don't really need to add or throw much into it. Basically, like any Pokemon game, the main goal of the game is to collect a bunch of Pokemon, catch them, level them up, and battle with them as you accomplish goals from A to B. You know how Pokemon games are. They're some of the most famous games in the whole world. For me to really describe them is, I don't really need to do that. But long story short, Pokemon Legends Arceus is probably the biggest break from the traditional Pokemon formula. Now, if you've been following Pokemon games for a while, you'll know that, like, Gen 7, which every Pokemon generation is broken up based on what games are in it. So, Generation 7 has had the same, has kind of broken with that formula with the whole, like, trials and everything. But Pokemon Legends Arceus is a free roam, open world game. The entire combat system is different from the typical turn-based one that the games usually use, and on top of that, just the entire structure and flow of the game is different. So to begin, I guess we could talk about the story. Whereas most Pokemon games start off with you, like a young adolescent, getting your starter Pokemon and going off into the world and having a fun, safe adventure. Pokemon Legends Arceus immediately starts with like a dark take on the story. Basically, you get dropped into the ancient land of Sinnoh, which is where the Generation 4 games take place, and you are basically given a small amount of time by the Galaxy team, which is actually like a good group of people who want to settle in Hisui. You're told you have to work for your place, or we're just gonna have to release you into the wild, and you're gonna die. And occasionally in Pokemon they've had stuff like that, so I think that's kind of interesting. And like usual, you're given your starter Pokemon, which this time is not a selection of new Pokemon, but rather old starter Pokemon from various previous games. There's Cyndaquil, which is from Gold and Silver. There's Oshawott, which is from Pokemon Black and White. And then there's Rowlet, which is from Pokemon Sun and Moon. And I think it's cool. I think it's interesting that they mixed up the starters, right? They could have just given you the Gen 4 starters again and just called it a day. And from there, you basically there's a grand total of 5 different areas to explore in the game. There's like 2 side areas, right? There's your headquarters and a couple other places. But for the most part, when you're playing this game, you're in one of 5 areas. Now, I know this is going to be a very hot take, but nothing that any of these areas have or do is really that spectacular. They're kind of like, remember when open world games were first getting started, like back in like 2008, 2009, like they just like open world was kind of like the de facto thing you put in a game when you really want to distinguish it, right? Like remember back way long ago when they had games like Darksiders and stuff like that. I mean, even comparing this to Darksiders is a little bit unfair to Darksiders. These open worlds, I'm not going to say that they're empty, but the biggest thing that I could say is that there's not really a ton for you to do in it, and especially when you come into account that the Pokemon that are available especially when you realize that the Pokemon that are available are such a small portion, right? I think the biggest way I could explain how this game works and how this game feels is that it's a lot of good ideas, but because they have limited the amount of Pokemon in the game to such a small number, you will very quickly find that just by catching a lot of Pokemon very quickly, that you're going to run out of Pokemon to really do stuff with. Or you're going to start seeing repeats as early as the 3rd and 4th area. There's always the same kind of Pokemon that are common in all these areas. And unfortunately, I think that makes the game very repetitive. There's no real sense of discovery. There's no real sense of, wow, I found where this Pokemon, was hiding. And I think that that's the first and biggest thing that I will say about pretty much every Pokemon game from here on out, because they have decided to not include all Pokemon in the game, right? Hilarious, we're on a fucking Switch console. Handheld consoles could include every Pokemon that existed up until now, for some reason the Switch cannot do it, and the Switch is a home console. I mean, like, yes, you could play it portably. It's a home console. That's the whole point of it. You could play it docked. I treat it like a home console. It's meant to be Nintendo's home console. It's a hybrid console, but it is still meant to have that definitive experience, especially when you plug it into the console, which is, that's what you could say, part of the problem with this game. But the biggest issue in the story is okay, right? Like, I think, not to jump around too much, but like I was saying, the story is okay. You play as some dude, or you could customize your character a little bit, which is nice. You could do hair, clothes, and even skin color at the start of the game. Basically, Arceus, which is essentially the god of Pokemon, the one that created the universe, wants to tell you to go out and seek all Pokemon before you can talk to it again. And to that end, he gives you a phone, which basically acts like your map, and also like a MacGuffin that lets you open doors and enter areas and whatever. It's basically there for when you need it, and it's used for some gameplay things, and that's it. Meanwhile, the Galaxy team is trying to settle the land of Hisui. The land of Hisui is, at this point, very, very, like, feral, right? All the Pokemon just walk up to people and are very dangerous. You know, everything is just kind of... It's definitely not a safe place like what we see in the Gen 4 games, or really any mainline Pokemon game, where Pokemon are just, you know, kind of docile to humans. Like, they're not mean, they're not overly aggressive. The Pokemon in this game will attack and chase you. Many people that you encounter have been hurt. You know, it's not like limbs are falling off or anything, but it's meant to be a very rough time for a lot of people, and people got to carry their worth. So you get recruited by the local professor, and basically what he wants to do is he wants to create a Pokedex, which is filled with all sorts of information and data on these various Pokemon. So that way you know, the people of the land can begin to live with them. They'll be able to understand it. They'll be able to consult it for information, and it's a pretty interesting goal, right? For the first thing, right? This is the first real Pokemon game where completing the Pokedex actually like has some story usage. I'm not saying seeing all Pokemon. I'm saying like catching all Pokemon and like being able to have the Pokedex entry, which I'll explain in a little bit. But long story short, you know, if you played the Gen 4 games, you're familiar with this. You go around to all the different areas. You know, you catch a whole bunch of Pokemon. There's a couple of bandit sisters that you fight with. Meanwhile, there's two tribes that inhabit the land, the Diamond Tribe and the Pearl Clan. And basically, they're constantly at war because they're deities, they're important Pokemon, basically, who are, for the sake of the game, just basically blessed Pokemon by Arceus himself, who have really strong powers. Their Pokemon basically are going into this frenzy, which is being caused by this terror in reality above Mount Coronet. And it's your job to basically go through each area, you know, recruit whatever partner Pokemon helps you get through the area, and then fix it and help everything out. And without going any further, there's a couple of twists and turns in the plot. There's definitely like sort of a finale. It reminded me very much of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where things, you know, like you play the whole game, things are going great, and then all of a sudden, you know, there's weird stuff that happens at the end, right? Like that. It's like every game, right? Especially every game where you have like a home base, right? Like there's always some twist and turn with the home base and everything like that. So then there's a little bit of post game. None of it's really memorable. I'm gonna tell you right now, pretty much every side quest in this game is filler. It doesn't add much or anything at all. It feels like it's just there just so they could have side quests to do. And like the biggest thing I'll say is like at the start everything feels so different and fresh, and it's a little bit fun, partly because it's new, you know, like literally the game is new, everything feels fresh when you play with it for a little bit, and then also partly because Pokemon, this game kind of begins to fall off a cliff, and that's really what I'm going to talk about in the second half, because the story at least has references to previous, you know, Pokemon characters, like you get to meet their ancestors, or you get to see how Hisui was developed, even though the map of the region makes no fucking sense. I will at least say that one thing that really kind of gets to me is the gameplay of this game ranges from really fun and different and interesting to downright fucking atrocious. And the way that I could say that, well, like, let's start back at the beginning, right? So when you pick your starter, you have to get, any, like with any Pokemon game, battling and conflict is like the biggest part of the game. Like it's impossible to play and talk about Pokemon without talking about catching and battling, right? So catching in this game is very straightforward. Maybe not as much as the previous games. Let me rewind. Catching in this game can have two different stages. You can catch a Pokemon traditionally like you would normally do in a battle, right? Like when you enter a battle with a Pokemon, you can throw a Pokeball at it at any point. Usually you want to weaken it, and then, the Pokeball will do the whole thing. In this game, it flies up into the air. The higher it flies, the lower the catch chance. But what's also nice is that in this game, there's a whole new stealth mechanic. You could walk around in grass. You could crouch, actually. I'm sorry. You could crouch walk in grass or hide behind objects. And then from hiding behind objects, you could wait for a Pokemon to have its back turned. And if you hit it with a Pokeball when its back is turned, you get like a bonus catch chance. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you could just catch the Pokemon outright. And then it won't fight you. And then that's it. You just have the Pokemon. So that's one of the pluses about this game, is that the amount of Pokemon that you can encounter per hour is like exponentially higher than any other Pokemon game, because you could encounter Pokemon, throw Pokeballs at them, catch them, not have to get into a whole battle transition and all that stuff. You could just find Pokemon, catch Pokemon, leave. It's very fast. This game is much more fast-paced than any other Pokemon game out there. But now, that whole process I just outlined has a lot of problems. For starters, and this is kind of a thing I realized later, the clipping in this game can be dog shit. And what I mean by that is, like, your character is unable to walk up even the simplest of slopes unassisted. Your character will slide down things like crazy. Your character cannot do any amount of basic swimming. Your character cannot do any amount of basic climbing. You are completely naked. And I think the biggest part of that is that if you're trying to hide behind an object, and, like, your character's right-handed in this game. Sorry, left-handed people. But your character's right-handed. So, like, obviously, if you want to throw something from around an object, like what people would do in real life, you would have to crouch towards the I guess the right edge, hold the item and throw it. But what happens is that because the clipping on some of the objects in the world is so bad, frequently you'll see things like Pokemon running directly up into trees, which is funny. And also, you'll throw an item, and then it'll hit an invisible wall around, like, the rock that you're sitting behind. And this is an issue that I've had happen to me multiple times, is I'll be sneaking up on a Pokemon, you'll throw the Pokeball from behind the rock or whatever, and because the way that they did the rock is there's a big box around it, you're gonna bonk your Pokeball on nothing. And then the Pokemon could hear it, they could get alerted, they could get skittish, which leads me into my next thing. Pokemon, when they're in the overworld, are, based on the species and based on, like, the lore and everything around them, usually these Pokemon can be skittish, they could be very, like, unaware, they could be just whatever, they could be very aggressive. So a Pokemon like Shinx is a more aggressive Pokemon than Bidoof, which is chill if you were to show up in front of it, which is, different than Starly, which will try to flee and then run away. Now, a Pokemon that will flee will look at you, actually see you, and then start running away. And then once they've run for so long, they will turn around to try to see if you're still following them. At which point, if they see you again, they will flee, fly, teleport, disappear. They will exit the map, basically. Regardless of where they are, there's no, like, exits they run to. They will just disappear on the spot. Now, an aggressive Pokemon will do, like, the Metal Gear thing, right? They'll do the exclamation mark. And then if they see, like, there's two steps to a Pokemon becoming alerted. They need to make eye contact with you, and then they actually need to have continuous eye contact after that initial eye contact. So, like, a Pokemon could see you for half a second, and then you back up behind something, and there's a chance that they might not have seen you long enough, so then they'll just raise a question mark, and then they'll just go on about their business. Whereas, same thing with skittish Pokemon. They might see you, and then if you hide really fast, or if it was like a little thing, they might just say, triple dots, and be like, I don't know what that was, but whatever. It's very much a common stealth game, right? The thing is that, and the reason why this matters is that a Pokemon that is alerted to you cannot be captured by a Pokeball anymore. So if you're gonna use the stealth option, you actually have to remain unseen. Now there's tools that you could use like smoke bombs and sticky globs, which basically disable a Pokemon and allow you to catch them regardless of if they've seen you or not. But I think the biggest problem with this system is that if you're doing a swarm or a massive outbreak, a Pokemon that replaces the Pokemon you just caught will psychically know where you are and become auto alerted for no reason. And that's really the common problem I have with this system, is that A, Pokemon will randomly become alerted for no reason because they either spawned in on a Pokemon slot that you previously caught, or B, Pokemon, like some Pokemon just completely shirk the rules I just said, and they'll be alerted without having the exclamation mark and the eye meter at the top of the screen, which shows you that you're being seen. Some Pokemon just get alerted, and the game treats it like they're like you're not in combat and you're not alerted. It's weird, and that's something I don't understand why it's not a homogenized system. You know, why would you teach a system and then have like a multitude of Pokemon that shirk this system? And it's not just that fleeing Pokemon can also throw an attack at you. It's that sometimes you can't catch them in return, which makes no sense. Then you're under attack, and it makes no sense. But that brings me back to my original point, which is that a lot of Pokemon in this game get alerted for no reason, and there's not really anything you could do about it. And especially when you're trying to do mass outbreaks, which is something that was added in the game's first major patch. You know, it's entirely possible for you to play the game, and you're going to be trying to catch these Pokemon. All of a sudden, they'll all know where you are. You know, it defeats the whole purpose of a stealth mechanic, right? Which is that I'm rewarded for not being found. What I think they should do, if they want to argue that, well, they need to psychically have the Pokemon know where you are, which makes no fucking sense to begin with. What they need to do then is they need to have it so that the Pokemon will actually look for you. These Pokemon that become psychic should investigate grass. You know, like any other. See how basic this is? This is so basic. This is in every game. Every game for over a decade has done this. You should have Pokemon investigate the grass. You know, just psychically being able to see you is kind of whatever. But going back to the Pokemon themselves, like I kind of said before when I got ahead of myself, this game does not have enough Pokemon. I know that this game is not meant to be a mainline Pokemon game that has all 905 Pokemon. However, Pokemon games only get better the more Pokemon that are in it. But very quickly in this game, using this formula where you can see the Pokemon in the overworld and choose to interact with them or not, you will begin to realize that there are tons of areas in this game where they reuse Pokemon. And they constantly put the same Pokemon in every single area. Now, what is cool about this game is that it has a day-night cycle that is disconnected from real life, unlike most normal Pokemon games, which allows for the cycling of the day-night. You know, Pokemon will spawn based on the daytime or the nighttime, right? So, like, there's no, like, morning. Usually, sometimes in Pokemon games, there's, like, a morning. It's either day or night, basically. So, Starly, for instance, will appear during the day, but that same spawner at night will spawn Drifloon, and so on and so forth. And that's a good way to potentially, like, add, you know, maybe a couple extra Pokemon in, right? Like, some Pokemon spawn all times a day. I don't really like having too much of a day-night system, because then I feel like it leads to things like, oh, well, you have to play at certain hours or something, which I can understand could be a little bit annoying. But my biggest complaint is that the Pokemon are used too much. For instance, Paris. I'm not shitting on it. I'm sure somebody loves it as a Pokemon. Why did Paris have to be used in, like, 3 areas? Why couldn't they add in another filler bug grass Pokemon? Or, you know, it doesn't have to be bug grass. You know, like a filler nature Pokemon into the rotation, right? You have so many Pokemon that you could have drawn from. You could have put in Venonat. You could have put in Caterpie. You could have put in Weedle, right? And before you say, well, this is a Gen 4 game, right? Like they wanted to have throwbacks to Gen 4 games. Paris and Parasect gain nothing in Gen 4. There's a lot of Pokemon in this game that are introduced either after Gen 4 or were not in the Sinnoh Dex to begin with, in the original games, or even in the expanded game, or Dex. So you got your usuals, right? Like this is where the favoritism kicks in. You got your usuals, right? The typical Pokemon are in every fucking Pokemon game. Pikachu will never be left out of a Pokedex. Let's not even pretend. Eevee will now never be left out of a Pokedex. So that means all the evolutions are also in the game and will never be left out. Magikarp, Riolu, stuff like that will never be left out. And now you're starting to see what the problem is that because you encounter more Pokemon in per unit time, right? Uh, you run into more repetition. It gets tiring faster, right? Like if there was a bigger if they just doubled the amount of Pokemon in this game. There's 242. I want to say about 20 of them are legendaries or so, give or take. So there's about like 220 Pokemon in this game. You know, maybe a couple are special or whatever. But let's just say there's 220 Pokemon you can encounter. If they just doubled that to 440, this game would still not have as many Pokemon as Diamond and Pearl did, but it would be better for the diversity and for the areas that you explore. When you want to go around, you wouldn't necessarily see the same handful of Pokemon over and over and over again. And at this point, it's inexcusable. They have 8 generations of Pokemon to draw from. They literally are on a home console, right? So there's no excuse like they, you know, oh, well, the DS can't handle it. But this is just modern Game Freak. They find the easiest shortcuts to not put work in and to not do anything and to just kind of plug and chug out a generic adventure that would have maybe been good in 2010, but otherwise is like completely outdated by 2022. Now, actually, I don't hate the game's crafting system. That was a thing. This game has a crafting system where you can make Pokeballs and other things in the field, provided you have the resources. You could also visit crafting stations for more craftables and more things that you could make. There's a stash where you could dump all your items because you actually have inventory space in this game that you could upgrade. All that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. That's a fine system. You know, you could use items and craft items as well. When traversing the overworld, you can use a variety of different Pokemon as you progress through the story to help you move around. All of them are basically like some of the new Pokemon that are introduced for this game. A lot of older Pokemon got new evolutions, which is cool. Although it gets to another point I have, which is that Pokemon that got regional forms for this game, basically the old versions of those Pokemon are probably fucked because they're not going to get regional evolutions. So for instance, Quillfish has a regional form in Hisui, which is that it's a poison dark type instead of a water poison, and it's a different color. It's black with a little bit of a different face, and then it evolves into Overquill, which is like basically a typical evolution, whatever. But like you see now how every normal Quillfish that we've had for the last 20 years is now worthless. Like there's nothing, like they don't evolve. It's not like they have a mega evolution or something that we could say, you know, buffs it out, right? Like makes it unique. And the same thing is going to happen the same thing happened to Zigzagoon. Sorry, I blanked. It's not in the game. I had to think about it real fast. And then, I mean, and it's the same thing that happens to a lot of Pokemon that get, like, specific regional forms that have evolution. So, for instance, Basculin has a new form in this game. Previously, there were 2 forms of Basculin. Red striped and blue striped Basculin. They didn't evolve. They were just a water Pokemon that existed. Now, there's white striped Basculin and white stripe Basculin are the only Basculin currently able to evolve into Basculegion, which is a brand new form. It's water ghost. It's got a lot of cool stuff. It looks very interesting, and so on and so forth. That's something I think is going to be bad for future Pokemon games, but I'm going to call it out now because I think it's dumb, and I really dislike that. But moving on from that, you can use some of these helper Pokemon when you're out and about in the wild, and they can help you like traverse things. So for instance, Wordeer, which is like basically your typical Stantler evolution, it's an evolution of Stantler. You could use that to run across the field. Wordeer can be used to jump. Wordeer can, you know, very hastily traverse the land, which is nice. You could use them to jump up small cliffs as long as they're not too steep, and that's pretty cool. Ursaluna is slower moving, but is basically the item finder of this game. You use it to find items hidden in the ground. They respawn, obviously. Sometimes they're necessary for you to evolve Pokemon. There's an item called a Peat Block, which is used to evolve Ursaring. The third Pokemon you get is Basculegion, like I said. You use it to traverse water. Basculegion might be by far the worst ride Pokemon, I think, in the entire game, because when you're on top of him, aiming at Pokemon is really bad. Because you can't swim in this game, and they wanted, the whole ride Pokemon thing to return, which is fine. Throwing Pokemon from Basculegion's back is a mechanic, unlike with almost any other ride Pokemon. And the problem becomes that the aiming on Basculegion's back is really, really bad. So when you're on water, a lot of times if you use the game's auto target, you'll just throw your Pokeball into the water. That's it. That's it. I don't know how else to describe it. If you just trust what the game is saying is a lock on and aim your Pokeball, then you're going to splash your Pokeballs and you're never going to catch anything. And also stealth in the water is impossible. So that whole mechanic we just discussed is basically almost not used at all when you're in the water. Now, luckily, you're not really in the water too much, but there are Pokemon there that you will catch. Each area has a water area and a river or something running through it. One area really focuses on water. So there is no way for you to stealth on Basculegion's back, and the aiming on it is terrible. When you're on Wordeer's back, the game will sometimes do like weird drift of the camera for some reason. I don't understand it. And like the last two Pokemon, which one of them is Sneasler, which will allow you to climb up walls and everything, which is fine, right? Like it's cool that they let you get all this movement. And lastly, Braviary, which is basically Hisuian Braviary just lets you glide around the area. And I want to really drill that home. The Pokemon lets you glide. It does not let you fly, you glide. And because of that, whenever you spawn Braviary, you'll automatically fly up a certain amount of space, and then Braviary will fly around, and as you fly, you cannot regain height. The only way for you to regain height on Braviary is to land and then fly up again. And that, to me, is like the most mind-boggling, like, what the fuck were they doing imaginable. It is incredibly frustrating that in almost any other game, you have the ability to flap your wings and go up. And then for some reason in this game, you can't. And I don't know why it is that they chose to make it a gliding thing as opposed to a flying thing, but whatever. But you might say, oh, why don't you just, be really high up and then just fly around and look down on all the Pokemon. Welcome to the next argument I'm going to make. Draw distance. Basically, in this game, when you're in an overworld, which none of these overworlds are connected, by the way, which is another thing, it's just like, yeesh. The game only loads things within a certain radius around you. And you can actually see it. The game will load grass as you get close, but things like trees and, hills and whatnot will be out there in the distance, but it will only load things like grass and Pokemon if you fly close enough to them. So if you're looking for shiny Pokemon, or if you're just looking for a Pokemon in general, you have to be close enough to the ground that you could see these Pokemon, but also high enough that you don't immediately lose height, land, and have to redo it again. And lastly, the biggest problem I have with every fucking one of these things is that you are not silent on a Pokemon's back. And for some Pokemon, that's fine. But when you want to sneak up on a Pokemon, right? Like, let's say a Pokemon's near a cliff, or like I said earlier, in the water or something, there is no way for you to be silent enough to try to, like, get behind, use whatever ride Pokemon, get up to that area, and then sneak. Which, who knows if there's even any cover there. But let's say that there is, like, cover, like tall grass or a rock or something you could hide behind. You cannot sneak up on Pokemon using ride Pokemon. I had a whole discussion about this with a friend of mine. It blew my fucking mind. You can't do it. It's not possible. What you can do is you could try to fly in with Braviary and then, like, hot drop yourself into, like, a patch of grass or something. But sometimes, like I established earlier, even, like, they'll just see you. They'll just see you regardless of, whether it's fair or not. Like, you could immediately crouch as soon as you get in the grass, but they will become slightly alerted to the fact that, a big fucking Braviary just came out of the sky and just disappeared. They hear that. They hear any of these Pokemon. Even Sneasler, right? Like the ninja climbing up the walls. They hear it. You cannot sneak up on Pokemon using ride Pokemon. It gets very frustrating, especially in the later parts of the game where Pokemon are hidden in, like, on ledges or stuff like that, you know, especially in the fourth area, which is basically all fucking ledges. It gets very annoying when you want to try to sneak up on something and immediately just be like, you can't, like, they could be looking the other way. You're like, all right, I want to climb up real quick, you know, just try to run up and catch, not literally run up, but like crouch walk up, catch it immediately because there's no cover. They'll just turn and face you. What a great mechanic. It's like stealth for fucking idiots. It's beyond frustrating. But besides that, I mean, I guess let's talk about the graphics since we talked about the draw distance. Yeah, this is a fucking PS2 game. Maybe a early PS3 game. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but don't you remember how good those games looked? Yeah, but what year did those games come out? Like, let's be honest here. Saying that something looks like a PS2 game is not inherently like a bad thing, right? Like, you could have like a platformer, right? Like, I think, not Cuphead, A Hat in Time, and there's a new one on Steam, I think called like Cow the Kangaroo or something, if I look real fast. What is it called again? Yeah, Cow the Kangaroo, which I think looks pretty interesting. I'm gonna wait and see if it goes on sale for the Steam Summer Sale. But besides all that, like those games, you know, like, first of all, I don't think anyone would want a game in 2022 to look like it stepped out of 2007. I don't think that you would buy a game like that unless you had a real attachment to, like, you know, like I said, like the platformer aspect or something. It's just not good, right? Unless you're an indie game. If you're an indie game, you kind of get away with stuff like this. But even then, look at some of the indie games now. They got the lighting, the bloom, you know, the water effects, the everything, because they're working on like Unreal Engine 4, right? Or let alone 5, or they're working on Unity, or they're working on some engine that, you know, has been updated, you know, at least like to 2015, 2017, right? So it's that's what you see what I mean. Like, it's not a plus to say that, oh, well, those games look good. Yeah, for their time. Everything looks good for its time, ideally. And that's the whole point. This game looks like it stepped out of 2007. If you showed me this game and you asked me what year did it come out, and I didn't know anything about, like, you know, Pokemon development and all the fucking lying and everything, I would say this game looks like it came out in 2010, right? For like the Wii or maybe the Wii U, like a Wii U launch title or something. This game does not look at all like it came out in 2022. Even by Switch standards, it doesn't look that good. And like, no game on the Switch is like a ridiculous looker, right? Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say that like one or two of them look really good. I think the best one I've played is like Metroid, right? And that's even Metroid Dread is not looking like it stepped out of like some crazy thing. But to be fair, I don't like a lot of games that have a lot of ridiculous lighting and bloom, so I was okay with it. But the point is that no Switch game is a true looker. But my God, this game looks worse than other games, right? Like Breath of the Wild was another open world game. It looked better than this game, and it ran better than this game at points. Xenoblade 2 was a game that looked better than this game, and that game definitely ran better than this game. Very rarely did you even get any slowdown in Xenoblade 2. This game, I feel like, to dodge slowdown as a big problem, they just had everything around you become unrendered, and you could see the circle very clearly when you fly with Braviary. The game will only load stuff in that circle and then unload Pokemon. So Pokemon outside of your like circle of rendering will have like frame rates of like 1 frame a second or something. But as you get closer, they'll snap into, you know, they'll get loaded, they'll have their actual frame rate. And then if you go away, they'll go back down. That's ridiculous. Even Xenoblade X did not do this, and Xenoblade X was on the Wii U. The fact that they could not do that is so immersion breaking, I can't even begin to describe it. And it's so, like, this is not even like he's hitting on Game Freak moment, because it's just so technologically behind. Even by the very fucking console it's on, there are games that have done it better for half a decade. It's inexcusable, in my opinion. It just is. Now let's talk about a couple things I like. In this game, you have different styles of moves that you could use. So, for instance, when you send out a Pokemon, you want to use Tackle, right? Well, Pokemon undergo this thing called Mastery, which is once they reach a certain level, it's not actually determined how much you use the move, you will master your move, unlocking two new styles for it. You could use Strong Style or Agile Style. Agile Style, as the name suggests, is like a lighter hitting version of the move that will increase your battle speed. Whereas Strong Style does the opposite. You trade more damage and then in return, your battle speed will be lowered. Now, this game uses a battle system that's kind of similar to Final Fantasy X, which is that a Pokemon can move multiple times in a row if they have the requisite speed, if they have the requisite moves that maybe increase their speed or lowered the opponent's speed and whatnot. That's all good. My only addition, it's not even really like something bad about this game, is that because this game lets you have multiple battles with multiple Pokemon, I think the infrastructure for that needs to be better. So, for instance, if multiple Pokemon see you at the same time, and if you when you send out your Pokemon, you can actually fight multiple Pokemon at once, kind of similar to the Horde battles in Gen 6 and what was it, the SOS battles in Gen 7. You could do that in this game. However, unlike those battles, because this game has no infrastructure for double or multi battles, you have to hit these Pokemon one by one. I feel like there should have been a third style that lets you spread your moves out, maybe reduce the amount of damage you deal by a little bit, but it would have made farming these a lot better, a lot easier, and a lot faster. That's one thing I don't like. Also, trying to enter multi-battles is a little fucky sometimes. It doesn't always work correctly, even when the Pokemon are dead looking at you. And then sometimes Pokemon will enter battle when they shouldn't, like they don't even know you're there, but that you're attacking their friend. That's a little more forgivable. But when 4 Pokemon are looking at you alerted and you throw your Pokeball down, only fighting one of them at a time is weird. It seems to be a species by species thing, but I think it's just a bad mechanic in general. It's not. It's like it has this really weird flaw in general. Damn, what was I gonna say? The battle system itself has changed, so a lot of moves are cut in this game, which means that the move pool is way less diverse than a normal Pokemon game. There's no abilities in this game. There's no held items in this game either, so this is kind of similar to the Let's Go games. Now, you could argue, oh, well, that's because, whatever excuse. But ultimately what it means is that you're kind of like, if people pick up Arceus as their first game, right? They're trying to learn the mechanics, and yeah, it's simpler because there's overworld mechanics to contend with, and that's probably why they removed some of this stuff again. Also, I think it's just because they're lazy, but whatever. You're basically teaching people like wrong Pokemon, and this is like one of my overall series complaints with modern Game Freak is like when you change the rules this often and remove moves and remove Pokemon and do this, do that, right? Like you're not teaching them the game itself. You basically have a set of rules for each game that just gets fucked with constantly. So if you want to actually learn Pokemon and get into it, like I could understand someone says, "Oh, well, I just don't bother." Right? Because it's like they change the rules every time. So a lot of Pokemon are weak to ground type moves that would otherwise have Levitate in this game or otherwise would not be hurt by it. And the same thing happened in Eevee, right? Because there's no abilities, and abilities have been such an integral part of Pokemon since 2002. It's kind of bad that they don't have that. Again, that's just a negative in my opinion. Removing features from Pokemon does not make Pokemon better. And lastly, the damage calculations in this game are fucking ridiculous. So you'll fight a Pokemon, like, yeah, it'll use a super effective move on you, and then it'll take like half your life. And meanwhile, if you go play any other game, Brilliant Diamond or Sword or whatever, these Pokemon, it wouldn't even take like a sixth of your health bar. You see what I mean? They jacked up the amount of damage that gets dealt to you. And in fairness, they probably jacked up the damage you deal. But it's not even that this game becomes hard, it's just that it becomes a revive chugger for no reason. You might have to devote resources to more revives. I mean, like, the game is easy enough that with a bare minimum amount of free roaming, you're going to be over leveled for the story anyway. And if you even treat this like I did, which is like, exploring every area to see what Pokemon is in it before even dreaming of progressing the story, right? Like, I personally really enjoy that about these types of games. I enjoyed it in BDSP with the Underground remake, and I also enjoy it here. Just going around, seeing what Pokemon is where. Because of the night and day, the Pokemon diversity here is better than Pokemon Sword's wild area, but considering that this is a whole game where they did that, it should be. And I just kind of think that they definitely should. Like, the biggest thing I keep coming back to is that they needed to have more Pokemon in it. I mean, that's the only thing I could say, is that they needed to have more in it. Ideally, back in the day, they used to have everything and everything, and you could just, like, catch as much as you want, and whatever wasn't in the game natively, you could import. But leaving Pokemon out, 220 Pokemon that you encounter is bad. Now, there's another thing I need to talk about, which is the The space-time distortions. So when you're in an area, after a certain point in the story, when you're in an area long enough, there is a chance that a space-time distortion will spawn. Now, the way that this works is that it's determined by the amount of time that has passed. I think it rolls so when you enter an area, the game will roll to see how long it'll take for your next space-time distortion to occur. So at first it'll check to see if there's a swarm going on. If there's no massive outbreaks, or it will actually move on. If there's no current space-time, it'll move on. And then it'll say, okay, anywhere from 5 minutes to 40 minutes is the next space-time distortion. And yeah, the game doesn't actually tell you this. This is something I had to look up. What the game doesn't tell you that is abso-fucking-lutely evil is that if you go to a tent, right, because you have base camps in this game, if you go to a tent and you say, I want to rest until morning, or I want to rest until like one of the designated 4 times a day, that resets your counter because it does a weird thing where it reloads the area or something. And that is evil. You could always select rest for a little while, but if you select rest until morning, rest until night, whatever, you will reset your space-time distortion counter. Nowhere in the game do they tell you this. There's they could just have a tip box pop up and say that. Nowhere in the game do they say that. That is literally something you just have to, I don't know, it's not even apparent. So for instance, if you're a new player and you're not, terminally on the internet, right? Like you might see the one space-time distortion. If you just play the game, occasionally say, I'm gonna rest till morning or whatever, you might never see a space-time distortion again. And you actually need to see space-time distortions in order to complete the game. See, this game, the way it is that you're supposed to complete the main story. You have to fight, and then you have to complete the Pokedex, basically. You might just have to see all Pokemon in the Dex, but completing the Dex with 10 different stages is actually like what I think I would consider to be like the actual end, because you get a little cutscene and everything. Now you are able to 100% the Pokedex. There's basically challenges that you do. So instead of like previous games where you just catch the Pokemon and call it a day, right? In this game, you have to catch a lot of the Pokemon because there's different challenges you need to complete. Like how many of this Pokemon have you obtained? How many have you evolved? How many times have you hit it with this move or with this type that it's weak to? How many times have you seen it use these moves, right? Like, and every one of these challenges you do, you gain 1 or 2 points based on if it has a little bonus arrow next to it. And once you hit 10 points, that Pokedex entry is considered complete. You get the full-on information about it, and you get a little Pokeball icon next to it to show that. Now, what the game doesn't tell you is that's actually part of how you get the shiny charm, is to get every different Pokemon in the Pokedex and get a rank of 10. And then once you do that, you get the shiny charm. It ups your shiny rate. It's actually the only game in this generation where the shiny charm works 100% as intended. And shinies in the overworld, which is basically what this game's entire post-game devolves into after about an hour or so of a finale arc or whatever, is looking for mass outbreaks and then shiny hunting. And then massive mass outbreaks, yes, I said it right, MMOs, will occur if you have updated the game to Daybreak, which adds a little bit extra story and whatnot, which is kind of cool. Massive mass outbreaks are also shiny hunting events. Like basically the whole point of these events is either to catch one type of Pokemon really quickly or to really hunt for shinies. And I mean, let's be fair, it's really a shiny hunt. And that's fine. I actually think that the way that they do shinies in this game is the best that they've ever done it. Mostly because you're encountering more Pokemon per hour, right? Like you don't have to enter a battle to see what the Pokemon is. And unlike the other 2 games this generation, Pokemon Arceus will display shinies in the overworld. I know, it's a fucking shocker, right? The thing that they did back in Heart Gold Soul Silver, right? Over a decade ago, finally returns in a spin-off game. I can't believe it. I can't fucking believe my mind. But anyway, when a Pokemon spawns in the overworld that's shiny, if you don't know how shininess works, it's a whole complicated number calculator, odds calculator. All you need to know is that there is a small chance that every time you encounter a Pokemon, it will be shiny, which is just like an alternate coloring. It doesn't affect stats or anything. It's just like a cool thing that can happen. And so generally those odds are like 1 in 4,096, but they get really low. In this game, they could get as low as like 1 in 120 if you fully complete the Pokedex all challenges, which is a ridiculous achievement. I wouldn't recommend it on my worst enemy. But if you just do the thing to get to 10, you get the shiny charm. You get a bonus for that. You get a bonus for hunting Pokemon in a mass outbreak and a massive mass outbreak, and so on and so forth. It's really nice. But by default, you could lower it down to 1 in 819 when you complete the dex to level 10. Yeah, that's what pretty much the only good thing this game has going for it. Because whenever they basically spawn Pokemon on the map and then change it as the day-night cycle goes if the Pokemon are eligible, right? Um, so for the most part, like Pokemon that you encounter on the day-night cycle will change, but everything else won't. So like whatever Pokemon is there will stay there until either you make it run away until it changes because of day-night, or you faint it, or you catch it. Like those are pretty much the ways that you can make a Pokemon disappear. And because of that, shinies will persist in the overworld even when you unload them, which is nice because the game generates spawn nodes and says this will spawn this, and it will generate it and hold it until it needs to change it. Like I said. There's also weather in this game, which is cool. The weather is actually kind of nice. I like that. Again, open world, the weather changes, whatever. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, I mean that's kind of it. It's like the most typical generic open world game I think I could imagine, without really discussing like just it has Pokemon on the title. Okay, that's pretty much the biggest thing. Okay, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I actually kind of stepped away for a minute. But I mean, to heavily summarize, I know I was talking about like shiny Pokemon and stuff before I left. I guess the one thing I would say about Legends Arceus is that it's a good template idea, right? Like the graphics aren't there, the performance isn't there, right? Like there's a lot of things about this game that just aren't done. It feels like a beta, it feels like an alpha, it feels like a massive stepping stone to what's coming next. And seeing that this game came out in January, already in like February they're announcing uh the next games in the series, Generation 9, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, are coming out. It really just has me thinking that this game was just like one of those weird games, like those interim games that they use to like dummy test features before the next big game, right? So like if Pokemon Sword was like a natural extension of the Gen 7 games, down to the models, the movements, the animations, the everything, which makes their lives even worse, honestly, then BDSP is like criminally like BSP is just kind of bad in a lot of ways. I'm going to talk about that in my own time. But Arceus just, instead of being this like shining jewel, just ends up feeling and looking like a tech demo. It feels like something that they had that was like good, right? Like it was like proof of concept. They added a story around it, and then they just kind of called it a day. Like there's not really like a ton of unique stuff about this game other than the fact that Pokemon is on the name. So like if this was like a Digimon game and it looked like this, I feel like the reception that it would get would be way worse than if it was a Pokemon game and looked and played like this. I mean that's just the realistic part of it. So ultimately, what would I give Legends Arceus? I mean, like, if it's any indication, I really don't think it's that great of a game. I think it's a game that has like a lot of value if you play Pokemon like, like normally. Like if you play a lot of Pokemon games, right? Like it's good because you could catch a lot of Pokemon really fast with very little effort, right? Like so if you have the hard part of rating Pokemon games is that because I played it for so long, like every game is like part of the ecosystem of collection, right? So like every game lets me collect new Pokemon in different ways with different moves and whatever. But like Arceus is just not a good game, and I feel like it's the same thing I said about Pokemon Let's Go Eevee. It's not a good game. They're not. It's the most bland open world I think I've played in years, right? Like everyone hit on Phantom Pain's open world, and everyone hits on the Assassin's Creed games and Breath of the Wild, but this might actually take the cake for like the most bland, repetitive open world out there. It's not even necessarily empty. I never understood the emptiness argument too much, but like the fact that you just see the same Pokemon over and over really starts to whine and rag on as things get worse and worse. And that's why I really genuinely feel that if they had added more, it would have at least added more longevity. You know, they could have added some of the Gen 8 Pokemon. They could have added, which are not available in almost any game besides Sword and Shield. They could have added in a lot of the other Pokemon, you know, Pokemon from other gens, right? Because for the most part, the Dex is just a redo of the Diamond and Pearl Dex with some extensions, you know, some popular Pokemon put in there. But like, I just feel that they could have done so much better than this. And ultimately, what would I give Legends Arceus? I would give Legends Arceus like a 73. Like, it's good, it's playable, you'll have a decent time from A to B, but the biggest problem is that while you're playing this open world game, it's just not worth the price tag, in my opinion. If this game was like $30, I would maybe have a better opinion of it, because you could basically bum rush the story in like 10 hours, and maybe 15 if you really want to explore and do some stuff. It's not like anything to write home about, right? Like, then that's the problem Pokemon games are kind of starting to have, I feel, is that when you get out of like the whole like Pokemon formula, like the 8 gems and the villain team, which admittedly it's been done a lot. It's been done for over like 20 years. Um, when you try to have like a normal story on Pokemon, like, you begin to realize like it's not special. It's not very well done. They have the characters to do cool stuff. They have the lore. They just don't. They could have included a ton more characters, like an ancestor to Kurt, or, you know, apricorns, like actual a variety of Pokeballs. There's only 9 Pokeballs in this game. It's literally nothing special. And I think that that's one of the problems that this game has, is that they just did not diversify the game enough. They had a baseline for what was good to get through the game, and then that's it, and they didn't really add anything else beyond that. So a 73 is what I'll give it. It could be so much better. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with Scarlet and Violet, but I'm not really impressed. I think it's the pinnacle of average, in my opinion. So an average game gets an average score. But in any event, I'm Swearing Pro 1000. Thank you for watching The Verdict. I hope to see you next time. I'll probably do Brilliant Diamond. I mean, I'm not going to do it today, but I'll probably do it at some point. So thank you for watching, and I will see you then.